Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Comic Corner, where we do news, reviews, and interviews. And today we have a very special interview for all y'all out there. We are joined by the wonderful writer of Green Lantern, Aquaman, Flash, pretty much almost all DC animation that you've seen in the past like 5 or 6 years. I am joined by the wonderful Jeremy Adams. Jeremy, how you doing?
Good, man. Dude, that intro is rad, by the way. Like, I love it. I think it's
Hey,
great.
it's easy when you're a big fan of who you're talking to, because I am a huge fan of your work. Our fellow co-host AF, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, is also massive fan. We have nerded out about Green Lantern multiple times. So I'm so glad that we finally got you in here. But we got a lot to talk about and not much time to do it. So you got a lot of news coming out, which is so awesome. Right. But before we get started, very quickly, since this is your first time here on the Comic Corner, do a quick little origin, a story that I know you have told a million billion times over. So I'll try to go through this pretty quickly. If anyone out there is interested in going in this more depth, shameless self-plug here. I actually interviewed Jeremy about a year ago, and we went very in his origin story. So if you want to hear more about it, go check that out over on my other channel, Sons of Mjolnir. But Jeremy, back to you, my friend. So you started off, obviously, grew up a super nerd. You mentioned Daredevil Born Again and Mark Gruenwald's Cap as like really major influences on you. Went to college for criminal justice, but then literally walked out in the orientation and quickly went into film. Moved out to LA, did some odd jobs for a long while, and then finally got your first paid gig with the Green Lantern animated series, which is, again, just crazy the kind of full circle your career has taken. But one of the questions I asked you all those long months, year ago, was kind of the mindset of keep going and keep going and always looking for that new opportunity, taking opportunities that present themselves. And I feel like that relates very well to the recent news that just dropped of you signing an exclusive contract at DC, which congratulations, my friend.
Man. Thank you.
But I feel like that concept probably applies with your time at DC as well. So I was wondering if you could kind of go in a little bit of, your time at DC once you started, and then again, kind of the concept of staying the course and getting to this point you are now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've talked about this a lot in terms of like when you're working for somebody, you have to be two of these three things. You have to be, really, really good, on time, and really nice to work with. And I can never tell if I'm really good. I just know that the two controllables that I can do is be really nice to work with and be on time. And in comics especially, I found that being on time is a critical component, because the machine keeps going. And I love comics so much. And when they offered me an opportunity to write for comics, I was just like over the moon. And I just did the best I could do. And some of it, a lot of it depends on if the fans are going to respond, if people are going to buy your book, and people got really excited about the Flash, and they were really kind about it. And I'm pretty open and easy to get a hold of and communicate with people, because I'm just a huge nerd that got this opportunity, and I never try to squander an opportunity. My mentor Jim Krieg is the king of just like, say yes, just say yes, just say yes. Even if you don't have time, say yes, you'll do it. The pressure will make you do it. And that's what I've been, is just saying yes and doing it and enjoying the heck out of it. Like, I find comics to be incredibly satisfying. So yeah, I never thought, I've been a freelancer in film and television and comics for ages. So it's like, I never thought they would say, hey, we want you to be exclusive. Like, it's such a vote of confidence, and it feels I feel very grateful and humbled by it. And I just think that at a time when DC is flourishing, and when you have the James Gunn stuff happening, I feel very fortunate to get to keep doing this, at least for a couple years before everybody turns on me.
Nah, man, I don't think that's gonna happen. I mean,
Okay,
you mentioned it yourself. The Flash was absolutely amazing.
thanks,
Green
dude.
Lantern has been crazy good. The first two issues of Aquaman absolutely kicked ass.
Thanks, you, dude.
So I
Thanks,
think you're in good standing, my friend.
thanks.
And like I said, just to see the progression of your career. I mean, last time we talked, I think there was two issues of Green Lantern out. So to
Right.
see it going, I mean, it went we're on issue 20 dropped
Yeah,
today at the
yeah.
time that we're recording this interview. So seeing it go 20 issues plus going into this new all in and absolute universe is absolutely crazy.
Thanks,
Just
man.
real quick, let me throw is Gary hopping in on the interview as well?
No, he can't. He doesn't have a download the right server, so he said
Okay.
go for it. Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to add him. Hi, Gary. Nice to
yeah,
see
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Nice to meet you. But so back to your work. Like I said, it's just so great seeing this kind of full circle, and again, seeing you get the credit that you rightfully deserve.
Ah,
And before we get into all this new stuff that we got going, I got a question here from our fellow co-host AF, who, like I said, is a huge fan, and he wanted to ask you really quickly about the Flash. So he
yeah.
says that your run on the Flash with Wally is applauded among so many groups. Was there anything left unsaid that you wish you could have continued with that character?
Yeah, heck yeah. What are you talking about? I left a back door, so someday I can come back and tell another story. I had a big 6, 7 issue arc that I wanted to do immediately after like issue 799. Um, and it's still in my head. I'm like, oh gosh, that would be so fun. And it's really about how Mr. Terrific and those male Furies and Omega Bandman and Gold Beetle and all those guys get back to Earth, and what that adventure entails. And someday, hopefully, I'll get to do 799.1 and 799.2, and
I mean, hey, I think the opportunity is looking as bright as ever again with this new exclusive contract. And I got to ask, just as like an outsider fan,
yeah,
not really understanding. So, like, what does that obviously that means you're writing exclusively for DC,
yeah.
but how does that really does that change anything for you in terms of like how you're, the titles that you're currently writing and plans for maybe plans you had before this contract came up?
Uh, uh, no, it doesn't. It doesn't change it in the initial piece, but it kind of affords me and promises me like to get to be able to do more, and a certain level of amount of comics a month, and that's exciting to me because I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity to do some other cool. Uh, I don't know. I'm hoping they'll chomp, they'll bite the hook on some of my weirdo ideas, and it's already given me like an opportunity to do a couple of things in the near future that our dreams come true for me. But yeah, it doesn't initially change anything because I'm doing Green Lantern, I'm doing Aquaman, and I'm doing the Green Lantern Corps with Morgan Hampton, but I can see down the line where I'll make some changes or I'll want to do something else, and hopefully, I think it gives me more access or more ability to do those things. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, obviously you are the most excited in this situation, but I
Oh
think
my
the
gosh!
fans are equally as excited because again, I know that when I heard that news, I was like, yes,
Oh,
let's
dude, thank you.
go. Because I mean, you just thrive in this DC universe. Something else that we talked about before as a kid, Green Lantern, Flash, like I loved those characters and
Yeah,
characters I often thought didn't get the kind of spotlight they deserved.
right.
So in my opinion, I just think you do that so well in showing everything that I love about these characters and
Yeah.
like I told you they're fucking cool. Sorry, I used our F bomb for the episode, but it's just like I told you, Aquaman is awesome. So getting into Green Lantern, when the first couple issues came out, you talked about how you wanted to keep, at least in the beginning, you wanted to keep the story somewhat grounded, somewhat smaller of a scale, so that way the audience could build this relationship with Hal until we went wild. And oh boy, did we go wild. I mean, planets after planets, the emotional spectrum is being just destroyed, spreading across the universe. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And we talked about balancing the kind of mythos with the Green Lantern Corps and the emotional spectrum. So now that the kind of veil has been lifted and everything has kind of exploded, to the like kind of bigger stakes that you were leading towards, what is your process like of just like, how do I want to say this, like expanding this mythos, or really not even changing it but just kind of pushing it to the limit of what that concept could be?
I mean, I think I was having lunch with Mark Waid and my editor at San Diego Comic-Con, which to me is like, that's crazy, and he had said, like, well, what are we going to do with Green Lantern after this? And I pulled something really wild out of my butt, and and they seemed to, oh, that's great. And so, right now, this story of the Sorrow Lantern and Starbreaker trying to build their own lantern that will potentially be ruinous for the universe is kind of the initial thrust of the story, but it's going to get a lot more complicated. and and some of the stuff that's coming is so completely bananas. I'm really excited about it because part of what I felt like I was doing when I took over Green Lantern is to bring it back to a certain status quo, even though there's variations. And the lanterns are back on Oa. There's a lantern power battery. The GLC is being refined, but there's a lot of twists, right? Like the Guardians are back, but they're a little different. And the human lantern, lanterns aren't arbitrarily picked by some randomized AI in a ring. They're picked by actual lanterns, and that are being, they more deputize people out in the field. And so there's little variations to make it interesting, but I think we're going to keep pushing forward and playing with some of the fact that anybody can manifest part of the emotional spectrum, and it can have disastrous side effects is interesting to me. And you're always trying to find different ways to tell the story. And we have Morgan and I have some big stuff coming with the Green Lantern stuff, both books as it gets nearer to the summer. And I mean, the only way to approach it is just to go as hog wild as you can and take as many swings as you can, and hopefully it'll pan out. It's not hard to pan out when I have like the most incredible artists ever working on these things. Like Zermanico's art is it's just unearthly. And Fernando's art on GLCs, I've never seen a person more excited to do Green Lantern Corps than Fernando Passarin. Like, absolutely nuts about it. So it's crazy. I'm so lucky to work with them.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought them up, because I was going to shout them out, because not only is your writing incredible, but the art is absolutely amazing. I also want to shout out colorist. I'm probably going to butcher this name. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Romulo Fajardo Jr.
So good.
I mean, in a book that's literally about color, like color spectrum, it is just wild. Some of those splash pages. I'm colorblind, and I'm like, holy crap! Like,
that's awesome.
It's freaking insane.
There is no better, quote for colors. I'm colorblind, but this is amazing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm, like I said, literally, I'm colorblind, and these, like, it's like I'm seeing colors I've never seen before, literally. And I love also that you brought up this new element that you guys are playing with, which I also think is probably my favorite thing of this the new arc that we're entering, is that people can manifest the emotional spectrum just like by feeling extreme emotions. And this might get into like spoiler territory, which I don't want any spoilers, but with our sad boy lantern
Yeah,
sorrow,
yeah.
and again that now that extreme emotions can manifest in these powers, what's one emotion that you're really interested to explore, like maybe one that's a little bit more obscure? Again, I know like that's probably get it teeters on spoiler territory,
Yeah,
but
it is. Yeah,
can
it
you
is,
like allude
TJ.
to anything like of just like I don't know, just like how you're thinking of that concept, right? And I mean it's mentioned in the book, which I think, again, I'm colorblind, but I'm pretty sure that this is impossible. But it's mentioned that like colors that don't even exist could come
Yeah.
into play. So like how would that relate to emotions, I guess, is maybe a better question that we can avoid spoilers on.
I think that when like Jeff was doing all this, that the idea that every emotion has a corresponding color, is kind of interesting. Like their wavelengths, just like color, like light is a wavelength. I think is really interesting. Listen, with the spectrum being fractured, and I think the first part of those fractures is the SAR lantern. You have, on one hand, you have people that are manifesting colors that aren't part of the fractured spectrum that we have, or not part of the traditional emotional spectrum that we've seen, like the gray sorrow lanterns. And there will be other colors that are not part of the regular Roy G. Biv of the emotional spectrum. But then there are going to be people that manifest colors from the emotional spectrum, and those are dangerous. Those are ones that don't have. Well, all of them are dangerous, but those in particular are volatile. Um, I don't want to. I don't want to say more, but you're very quickly going to be seeing a lot more uh, uh, emotions that are going to show up because. No, I can't say anything more.
I would say let's keep it, man. Like I said, I genuinely don't want spoilers. I want
Yeah, yeah,
everyone to discover this on their own, like
yeah,
how I have been. And I mean, that just makes it just such a creative idea. And it makes my mind, I mean, just like thinking about emotions on it. I'm
yeah,
sure you have thought about this extensively, but I
yeah,
mean, emotions are complicated. And like, yeah, you can be happy about something, but maybe that also makes you sad. So
yeah,
like,
yeah.
would that mean is that still happy? Like if we're going off
Right,
of the color spectrum,
right,
would that still be the color of happy, or would
right,
that manifest as something, again, a brand new color? So
right, right.
I just like it.
And
It
what's
makes
the color for happy?
yeah.
That's another question. Yeah,
I mean, I would say yellow. I mean, yellow's already fear, but like I'm
yeah,
thinking sunshine, you know.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But again, with all of the work you've done on Green Lantern so far, again, we talked about how everything has kind of blown up in scale, and we're kind of getting back to a status quo here. But another thing that it's just so much fun reading the book is the constructs that you come up with. We talk about, the chainsaw, I was catching up, refreshing myself this morning, Hal and John Stewart in like the big ass muscle
Yeah,
cars.
yeah, yeah,
It's so cool. And I think this relates also to your Flash work with the Bam
yeah.
Man wrestler character. I feel like you just do comic book action in such a way that it maintains that kind of silver age fun, not it, but it doesn't cross over to like cheesy or
Right,
whimsical.
right.
But it like a cart, which I mean, with your background in animation, I'm sure contributes to that. But it just is very visually fun action. So I want to ask, when you're writing your scripts, how do you kind of think of that balance of making it both intense and like feel like there are stakes, but also still maintain the fun? And then how does that relate to the artwork as well, like your collaboration with the artist and colorist?
The honest truth is, it's not something I like. I want to make really interesting constructs because I think that's a huge part of the Green Lantern book. That that's the hardest part. It's like, how do we do something different? Um, but what you're saying as far as action is, that is not something that I have to think about hard, because I love action, and it's such a product of being raised on 80s action movies where every action scene was crazy and like over the top and interesting and weird. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen John Woo's Hard Boiled, but there's a whole action scene at the end where, Chow
Yes.
Yun-fat has a baby and a shotgun, and you're like, this is effing awesome, So that stuff just pours out of me to the point where, like, when I was working on Supernatural, I remember, like, I had a fight scene and I wrote out the entire fight scene, and the producer was like, "What are you doing?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"Why'd you write out the fight scene?" I go, "Because I
Isn't
don't.
this what you do?
I like it." And they're like, "No, we have a stunt guy that we just say." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that's cool." Um, so I love action scenes, and I love big, fat, epic action scenes. And when I know that I have a collaborator that can that does it better than even what I imagine, it's even better. Like John Tim's on Aquaman right now. Like he's so good at certain things that I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to just put this down and see what he does.
Yeah.
And Zermanico, obviously, his scope, it's so cinematic, and I'm constantly thrilled when I see stuff that he does. So it's really fun. So, like, say the instance you talked about John and Hal having the monster trucks, I think I wrote it as like making construct cars straight out of Mad Max, like crazy, whatever. And then he pluses that times 11, and he makes it just look so good. So I'm pretty pumped about it.
Yeah. I mean, that must just be such a cool feeling, like
Yeah.
imagining something in your head and then getting something that's even better than what you imagine. Like
Dude,
that's
I'm
got to
telling
be
you,
such a cool feeling.
they are the Green Lantern rings. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
but they're like better.
Yeah.
'Cause it's like, here's an idea I have, and
Mhm.
I remember there was a when Sinestro was manifesting the red energy and he became this giant monster. And I think I had made it, oh, let's make it like, this dinosaur from Jurassic Park, but like alien. And then Zermanico just made this like terrifying construct. I was like, this is freaking awesome, man. So
Yeah.
it's also important to me to make sure that the person I'm working with is enjoying themselves. Like,
Mhm.
I'm constantly asking them, like, what do you want to do? Probably pestering them too much, but I want them to be excited about it. Like, I want them to be thrilled about it. Fernando in GLC, he's just happy to do everything. And I've tried to say, like, what else do you want to do? And he's very much like, this is great. I just like,
Yeah.
you just keep doing this and I'm enjoying myself. Whereas Zermanico is like, hey man, if we can have more jets or fighter, I'm like, awesome. Like, let's do it.
You got it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about, the power of collaboration and being
Yeah.
able to trust your collaborators. And I mean that it definitely shines through in the book. I even just some of the panel layouts are just crazy. Like
Dude.
the amount of things he's able to fit in a
Yeah.
single page.
Yeah.
It's like it awestrucks me if that is the
Yeah.
right
And
word.
and with Zermanico, it's like, once we figured this out on Flashpoint Beyond, because he spends a lot of time figuring out like, I'll put, panel one, panel two, whatever.
Mhm.
And he will design the page, and then he'll be like, I need to add a panel, or I need to do this, that. And I'm like, go with God, bro. Like, I've said this before, I can barely dress myself. There's
Yeah.
no reason I should be telling you what to draw. Like, you do you, and I will come in afterwards. But I'm really grateful because he makes everything look better. If I and Jeff Johnson told me when I started, and it was Germanico, he's like, dude, make sure you give that guy enough room because his art's so fantastic.
Mhm.
Just make sure you have enough room for him to shine. If you put 9 panels on a page, he would, it would be a disservice to him. Versus like John Timms on Aquaman, I would like at 7 panels, 8 panels, and he makes it look breezy.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting, the different styles artists have, and their strengths and weaknesses, and what they can and can't do, and what makes them shine and not shine. And I try to be conscious of that, but like, I'm always constantly like, I just want to make sure that they're having a good time. Like, I'm such a people pleaser, but I just want to make sure that the artists I'm working with feel heard, and they feel like they're, because it's their book too. I mean, to a
Yeah.
degree, it's like they're so there's so much the DP of a movie, you know,
Mhm.
and so yeah,
Yeah, I mean, comics obviously in, just the basic concept of them are visual. Like
yeah,
the
yeah,
you're writing the story being told, but the artist is showing you the story, right? Like it would just
yeah,
be it just would not be a comic book. And I think, as well as I do, artists, colorers, letterers don't often get the love or
yeah,
recognition that they
yeah.
deserve. And like you said, they are just as much a part of the book as the right. Not taking away anything from you, Jeremy.
No,
You're
no, no, no,
amazing,
no. But I
but yeah,
agree. I agree. I
it's
agree.
just a complete collaborative effort. So I love when we have the opportunity to kind of highlight their work as well and
Yeah,
how it all works together. But going off of his amazing work and these massive, crazy paneling and big splash pages, those are a lot credited to this massive roster of characters that you're playing with.
yeah,
I mean, there. I'm not a Green Lantern expert, but I know there's like thousands of them, probably just like
right.
different species. I mean, you could create just a regular alien one. So, and I mean, something I also love is I've been putting a highlight on some of my personal favorite Lantern, like Kilowog, Kyle Rayner, Simon Boz. I really love how it seems like you've been able to give almost everyone their moment, whether
Yeah,
that's like a big arc in the story or just like a cool moment that they
yeah,
have.
yeah,
So how do you go about balancing this massive roster of characters? And not only that, but again, so now that the core is kind of realigned, we kind of have a core group somewhat, but how do you decide, like, oh, next issue I'm gonna throw this dude in here, like this random lantern, like how do you balance all that?
yeah, maybe it's from years of reading Stephen King, where he was like disappear and you follow other people and you'd be like,
Yeah.
there's a feeling internally when I'm writing a lot of times with the pacing where you're like, oh, we haven't heard from this guy. We got to go back to him. Like, oh, it's been too long. I need to know what's going on with this person, even if it's for a moment or whatever. And then there's this feeling of you want to hold back on certain moments too, right? Like you want to tease that Kyle's going through emotional trauma for a long, long time, so that when he turns into the White Lantern, you're like, yeah, you want to have that
That was
catharsis in that
so
moment.
cool, so
It's so
freaking
cool.
cool. Back
I
to the
love it.
art, oh my god,
Oh,
that
it's so good.
oof.
So there's a lot of that where you're trying to feel the tide of those characters, and like this character needs to speak now. Like like uh, I do try. I consciously try to make sure that everybody has a moment. There are the people that are the main focus of the book, like Hal's the main focus of the book, and in the GLC, what Morgan and I are trying to do is more of, yeah, the first couple of issues. There's going to be more of a focus on like John as like a character, but you're going to have Kilowog and Razor and Hawkwoman for some of it, or Sinestro for some of it. But the main purpose of that book is to highlight a lot of the other characters, the other Green Lantern characters, and give them more, dive more into their backstory and stuff that they're doing as individual characters. Because you're right, it's a big roster. It's a really big roster, and you only have so much page space, and everybody is a fan of somebody, and somebody's always going to be upset that you're not spending enough time with
Yeah,
whoever. But that's okay too. I mean, it shows me that Green Lantern in particular could probably, I mean, it could probably hold more stories. Like, even so, right now there's Green Lantern Core.
mhm.
Those are the main in continuity all in books. There's a Green Lantern Dark book, and there's a Absolute Green Lantern book, which are a little separated. So Green Lantern has a deep bench of stories that could be told. But yeah, I just internally think about, like, oh gosh, we haven't seen this character. Oh gosh, we haven't seen, and I did that with the Flash too. It's like I want to make sure that all these characters have a moment to shine, because they're somebody's favorite character, and even if they're not the main character of the book, I want to give them a moment.
I love that so much. I just love the thought process behind that. Like you said, every character is someone's favorite
Yeah,
character, and I just love that approach and that you're even thinking about that at all. And
yeah,
I also I'm a sucker for a deep cut, like just
yeah,
like a total deep cut weirdo that has
yeah,
been in like one issue. We were actually just talking about this in regards of Steve Orlando's Scarlet Witch. He loves to throw out
yeah,
some
yeah,
like very obscure characters. So I I don't take any advice from me. You're the
yeah,
expert. You know what you're doing, but I please more weirdos, more
yeah, yeah,
weirdo
yeah.
one-shot characters. I love that stuff.
Me too.
But again, I just love how everyone is getting their moment. And I think you balance that roster just so well. And
Excellent.
we got to get into Aquaman before we get out of here. But one
Yeah,
more question I have for you is: we were actually just talking about this on one of our last episodes. I'm not sure what book one of the DC books, but our my fellow co-host Damon, who's very much in tune to the all in stuff, he was sort of talking about how it feels like in a couple of the most recent issues, we're starting to see so absolute all in this big, shattering of universes. The absolute
yeah.
universe is kind of seeded with dark side energy. So things are darker, right? But in the all in universe, at least how I understand it, I'm no expert, but it's kind of influenced more by Superman, like goodness, good energy, right? So I feel like I feel that a little bit in this new arc of Green Lantern. Again, like after the catastrophic events that we just went through, the core is getting back together, and obviously we still have our big threat so looming. But I do feel like there is a little bit more of a hopeful nature to the book. So is that something? Was that a conscious sort of shift with this all in initiative of like thinking of it in terms of like, okay, this new all in, like with this new arc we're starting, is in a more hopeful environment. So I'm like, this
I
is the direction I'm gonna go.
I think no. I first of all, I'm a pretty hopeful person,
Mhm.
so I always have that. I think that's always going to show through in a lot of my work, you know.
Yeah,
But also, I think the DC continuity proper is generally hopeful. That's always been the case when I was
agreed.
growing up. It was always a little more shiny than like what was going on at Marvel, right? Like it was a little more hopeful, a little more big, and obviously part of that was Superman, part of that's Wonder Woman, you know, even Batman, which isn't, you know, he's probably the darkest character in the DC pantheon, but I always felt it was big, broad, hopeful stuff. And so I don't think it was a conscious decision to be like, hey, but you're right, like that's a big through line that's happening through the DC universe is obviously with the All In special and what happened to Dark Side, you know, and not only that, but you have Aquaman, us hinting at things happening. Things are going to start happening in other books. You're going to start to see, I think, I don't want to say interconnectivity, but at least the stories, there's a little bit of bleeding between those things, you know? And it's really interesting. And I'm super excited to be playing in the same yard as everybody else.
Yeah, I mean it's a big yard. I
Yeah,
am very admittedly more of a Marvel guy than DC, but
sure.
this absolute all-in stuff, I am a sucker, dude.
Oh,
I
cool,
am just
man.
I'm eating it up. I love it. I
That's awesome.
absolutely love it. And I mean, let's hop in right into the Aquaman, dude. I mean,
Yeah,
there's two issues out currently, very fresh off of it, and you are doing some awesome stuff. We just talked about how Green Lantern started off kind of very grounded.
yeah,
I feel like it not the complete opposite, but we hit the ground running, like
yeah,
foot on the gas. Aquaman's fighting giant water monsters. He can
yeah.
control water. I mean, it is we just talked about that kind of fun superhero action. It is that in spades. So I want to, as someone who's not necessarily expert on Aquaman, like I said,
Sure.
as a kid, I always thought like people, bash on Aquaman. I always thought he was super cool.
Yeah,
But I feel like as an outsider, I feel like Aquaman has very a lot of variations of the
Yeah.
character throughout the years. I mean, we have the class. It feels like you're going more of the classic route of, the orange suit and all that, but then there's the dude with the hook for a hand, the more brutal, and then obviously in recent years we've seen a lot of like the Jason Momoa influence
Yeah.
on the character. So when this gig came about and when you accepted the gig, where did your mind immediately go for how you wanted to approach Aquaman for this series?
I the first thought I had was, I wonder if Aquaman misses eating hamburgers. That's literally the first thing that I thought, because I was like, I think what gets lost in the shuffle a little bit is that Arthur Curry was raised on land, and 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 we just concentrate on the guy who, saves people in the water and has become a king, and that sort of thing. And I honestly, but he's still a guy that grew up. He probably rode a bike, he might have had a tree fort, and I was very interested in the kind of terrestrial version of Arthur Curry. And the part about it that was interesting to me was like, I didn't know the answers to these questions because there wasn't that much written about him as a kid. There wasn't that much written about him pre-superhero, and that was really interesting because I realized I don't know much about this guy. I don't know much about his humanity. And but I do know what it's like to be a dad and a husband. And I do know that if somebody was to take that away, that I would rip apart heaven and hell to try to get that back, if you had that in a world where you could do that sort of thing. So um, this is definitely an exploration of Arthur, of who he was and who he is, and about a strange prophecy. And it's definitely has a high fantasy vibe to it, because I wanted to take Aquaman in a direction that maybe hadn't been done before, and something that's a little different. And maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. There are big fans of Aquaman that are upset, like, oh well, we don't. Where's Mara, and where's the this and that? And I'm like, yeah, this is a different story right now. Right now, like, I see this in 3 chapters, and the first chapter is definitely this. I say it up front. This is the story about Arthur Curry, the God Killer, and whatever that story is. And it's very it's much more aggressive and violent, I think, that people are going to be used to in some ways. But I'm excited about it. It's definitely scratching a kind of 1980s Beastmaster vibe, like this kind of like Conan the Barbarian thing that
Yeah.
I'm really excited about. And yeah, I'm pumped about it.
I mean, that's something that immediately piqued my interest reading the first 2 issues was how I wouldn't necessarily say dark, but
Right.
yeah, like
Right.
more brutal than I was expecting. And I mean, the God Killer
Yeah.
of Aquaman, he's referred to. I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but they refer to him as the Dark Tide.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, oh hell, and it's like I love it because I don't get me wrong, I like the more brutal versions of
Yeah.
Aquaman, but I also love just the classic. Like I said, so it feels like you merged those two like beautifully into this kind of new version that is brutal, but also, like you said, has that humanity. The like it
Yeah.
all hinges on him getting his family back.
Yeah.
And another thing I think relates very well to what we kind of talked about with Green Lantern is, again, you're using Aquaman's powers in such creative ways and
Right.
kind of pushing that concept into new abilities that we've never really seen from him before. So again, similar question to Green Lantern, what is the process like of, really dissecting what does this power mean and like what are the potentials that have not been seen before?
What was interesting about it, like the hydrokinesis in particular, after the all in, after the absolute power thing, everybody's powers got mixed up a little bit. And so editorial had said, like, hey, we want Aquaman to have some of Mira's powers, like a hydrokinesis. So it was kind of an editorial ask. And I was like, okay, cool, and then I was like, how is Mira she's an expert at that. Like she's an expert at hydrokinesis. And so here you have somebody, Arthur, who obviously has a great deal of power and now has this new power and is learning to use it, but he doesn't have the training or the years of experience that maybe Mira does. He doesn't have the elegant touch that she does. So really, he's doing it in very rudimentary ways. He is a blunt force, object in a way, and so he
Yeah.
uses water like that. Like the most sophisticated thing he did is make a giant wave to catch a plane, right? And then beyond that, he's starting to use it in ways that I think are, dark and twisted, like him using blood and being like, well, I can move this because it has water, and but it's born out of survival and it's a very kind of remedial way of using it, I guess.
Mhm.
But there's going to be more of that. There's going to be more of him trying to figure out how do I use this, but it's not again as ornate as maybe like when I think of Mira using it, it's very much like Green Lantern using a ring, the
Mhm.
constructs and the complexity and stuff like that. Arthur definitely doesn't have that ability. He's more of like, can I cut off somebody's head with, whatever,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
said, not as nuanced.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure Mira has like a bunch of creative ways in which she could neutralize a threat,
yeah,
but Arthur's just like, I'm gonna freaking punch its head off or
yeah, 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 yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I I love that. And again, same thing with the Green Lantern stuff. It just water. I was actually just watching. It's so weird. I was watching something about water when I got into like a YouTube hole a couple days ago, and basically just like talking about the concept of how before there was ever life, there was
yep,
water, and
yep,
like water was the basis of basically all life in the universe, and it's expansive everywhere.
right,
And I know that this is getting into spoiler territory, so you don't have to say anything, but I definitely can feel you kind of leveraging that concept
yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
this story,
yeah,
and how so many things that I think people don't really consider are all kind of bonded together
yeah,
by water.
yeah,
So I mean, again, it makes my mind race, dude. I
yeah,
can only imagine where this is going to go. Again, we're only 2 issues in, so I'm sure we can't really talk about much going forward. And again, I want everyone to experience it for themselves. But with balancing Aquaman and Green Lantern, we talked about kind of your what you want to say with Green Lantern. With Aquaman, what do you hope that fans can take away from this new run as we go through this journey with Arthur, and just what kind of voice you want to put on again? Because I personally feel like Aquaman's a character that doesn't get enough love. So
yeah. I
how
think
do you
I
hope
think there's
people
gonna.
respond to that?
I think people are going to. I hope that people are end this by going like, man, that dude is badass. Like I want it to be like scary level badass, like a level of there's like moments with Wonder Woman where you're like, when she turns it on and she's just like, I'm a warrior, and she just murks people, you're like, dude, that's awesome. Or even
Yeah.
like Thor, Thor's a better example of somebody you're like, yeah, he's cool. But I don't, you remember War of the Gods, and like, it's like, but then there's the Thor that's,
Oh yeah.
just trashing armies, and that's kind of the level of, I want people to be like, holy crap, Aquaman is not
Hell yeah.
a guy that just saves people in a dinghy. He's the guy that like can take out Godzilla if he needs to, and that's
Oof.
that's cool to me.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, I've never really thought about it before, but yeah, there's a lot of parallels between Aquaman and Thor, and kind
Yeah,
of that balance of, the duty of being king and
yeah,
also protector and
yeah,
warrior. And
yeah,
I'm pretty sure this was a line in one of the first issues, but heavy is the head that wears the crown.
yeah.
And I think you're really hitting home on that concept with Arthur, and like the kind of weight that holds. So again, I cannot wait for more of this. Everyone watching and listening to this, be sure to go pick up the first 2 issues of Aquaman. Also pick up
Yeah.
Green Lantern number 20 that just dropped today. But I can't get you out of here without trying to get a little stuff from you about the future, because that's what we're here for. And I mean, not what we're here for. I just love talking to you, but I got to ask you for a couple little nuggets. So last time we talked, again, Green Lantern was just starting, and I asked you of what a dream character at DC that you would love to write. And this is actually a question from our buddy AF as well. Had pretty much the same question. But when we talked last time, you said that you do have a dream project at DC, but it seemed like no one wanted to do it. And then you also said that if Green Lantern, quote, if Green Lantern goes gangbusters, maybe that will give, you're good, man. Maybe that will give me the runway to be able to get this idea going. So is this the story that you were hoping, or is that still, I'll say, is that still under wraps, still hopefully in play?
Yeah, I try to pitch it all the time. So no one's interested yet, but someday.
I'm very interested. I'll write DC myself. I'll send an email to Gunn. But going off of Gunn, I also, another question from our buddy AF, and even if this is true, not true, or if this is happening, I'm almost positive you cannot say anything about it. But with this whole new not even rebirth, but just kind of new era for DC comics, movies, shows, all of this crazy stuff. Obviously, you have a very long career in history with animation and other forms of media. So has anybody reached out possibly in the form of maybe consulting or any sort of involvement, like with the Gunn and Saffron stuff?
No. No. But I'm still doing animation stuff on the side, which is fun. I'm doing a bunch of Lego stuff. I have got a DTV that's going to come out maybe this year. But no, I mean, I of course would
not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, I would go gangbusters for it, but that'd be great.
Yeah. Oh, it's gonna happen, man. Like I said, I'll send an email to Gunn. He won't see it, but if I do it every day, maybe it's a better possibility.
Maybe. Yeah. A lot.
But going off of the same kind of similar question, we also got the news recently of a Jessica Cruz animation show.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Set in the universe of the recent Superman show that just came out.
Yeah.
So I'm not, like you said, you're doing kind of animation on the side, so I don't know if you're involved in that at all. But
no.
Just as a fan, and obviously someone who is very involved in the Green Lantern world, what do you hope to see from this? Like, just as a fan, like, what do you want to see from the series? Is there any kind of lanterns you maybe would like to see pop up?
Well, I always want to see Kilowog show up and call somebody a loser, But if it's Jessica, I think Jessica has such a strong character built in of somebody that deals with anxiety and depression, and like her will to overcome that, I think is so interesting. And if it built to a place where, her relationship with fear is so interesting to me, and it would be interesting to build to that. But that'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I love that Superman show, and Jessica Cruz is a character
They're gonna do a great job. They really are.
I admittedly don't know much about, so I'm super excited to jump in this adventure. And Jeremy, before I got one last question, this is again from our good friend AF, who unfortunately.
All right, last question.
Yep, last one. I've said it twice already, but favorite all-time DC story? Quick, easy.
All-time DC story. Listen, Dark Knight Returns is always going to be a seminal piece for me. Pretty much that, Batman Year One. The Man Who Has Everything Superman story is really, really great. Gosh, there's too many, dude. But you can't say what's the number one story that you've ever read. It's like, but those are three. I'll just say Dark Knight Returns shake the very foundations of Batman. So that was a big one.
I mean, you can't go wrong with the classics, my man. Jeremy, I cannot thank you enough for coming and nerding out with me today. It has been so
Cool,
much
brother.
fun getting to
Yeah.
examine your work and go through all the great things happening for you right now. But before
Thanks,
we get
man.
out of here, throwing it off to you, let the people know where can they find you, anything that we should be looking out for besides
Uh,
Green Lantern, Aquaman.
just go to spacekicker.com. You can sign up for my Substack or go to my socials, which are all Space Kicker related. So that's about it.
Beautiful. Everyone, make sure you're keeping up with Jeremy. Again, go pick up Green Lantern, go pick up Aquaman, and anything with Jeremy Adams' name on it, pick it up because I guarantee you will love it. Be sure to follow us on Agents of Fandom, at Agents of Fandom, pretty much anywhere. You can also check out our most recent interview with the Daredevil showrunner, all about the new season. And pretty much any show that's on TV, we have an after show for it. So be sure to tune in for that, and you can catch us on Corner every Thursday. Thank you once again, Jeremy, and we will see
Thanks,
y'all
man.
next time.